Hi and welcome to this week's Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we're talking again about the inner child. Now, many people ask us, does the inner child actually exist, or is it just a figment of our imagination? How does the inner child fit in with the wholeness of who we are, our authentic self and our spiritual nature? And most importantly, why is the inner child so very powerful in terms of how it affects our life, our potential, and our health and well-being? Okay, David, so is the inner child real, or is it a figment of our imagination?
Well, you're real, and the inner child is a label that I think is very powerful. Some would call it your ego. Now, personally, I don't like to use the word ego because it gets confused with Freudian ego, and so many other therapists use the word ego, and it gets very confusing. Some people like to call it their emotional mind. And what we're trying to do with all of these labels, we're trying to identify a part of your mind. Personally, after my long time, 45 years of working on these emotional issues, I think the label, the inner child, is the best one. And hopefully, in this back to basics video that we're going to do now, we're going to take micro steps and I'm going to try and explain to you why it is so useful and why that label or the metaphor of the inner child can be so successful when used correctly.
Okay, so David, it's a part of our mind. The inner child is part of our mind. So under that bracket, it's a part of what we think, our self-talk and our beliefs.
Yes. So from a Taoist perception, the mind is the human part of us, like our skin and bones, our skin, our cells, what makes us human. But then we have another side of us that I would call Shen. And this is represented in this sign. This is my sign, really. I love this sign. Most people call this sign Yin Yang, and that's a great title for it. The correct name is Tai Chi, the great ultimate, because this symbol, this sign, represents how energy works. So for anything to be whole, a oneness, and we did this teaching on our last live meditation video on Sunday. For everything to have a oneness has to have two characteristics to make it whole, a yin and a yang. So you are a oneness, you are whole, and so therefore you have to have a yin and a yang. Your human side of you is the yang. The opposite side of you that makes you whole is your Shen, your spirituality. So these two things make you whole. The inner child is almost like the voice of the human-centered part of you.
Okay, so the human part of us is the physical, our physicality, as you say, our skin, our bones, our cells, but it's also our mind. And I think what you've just said is the inner child it's almost like the voice of the mind. It's the self-talk. It's what we hear the most. Is that right?
That's right. And so you can put all different names on it. But why I like the word inner child, because it just acts like a child. You know, those times when you say, I can't believe I've just thought that. I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe I just did that. It is like a child. It has temper tantrums we call squealing piglets. It plays up. It sulks. It does all the things a child does. And that's why I think the terminology of the inner child is so powerful when used correctly. Because on this back to basics, it allows you to look at that part of your mind in a kind of a different perception. It allows you to see and talk to that part of the mind in the correct way that brings what we're trying to do in all of our videos to bring you back to a oneness.
Okay, so is the inner child created, or has it always been part of our mind, or is it developed at a certain stage in our life?
So from my experience, it's a label, and it's labeling a certain part of your development as a human being. Now, for me, and what I would like to pass on to you, and these are not exact, but around the age of 6 years old to 9 years old, for me, when I'm working with thousands and thousands of clients over the years, this time period seems to be very relevant, because I believe when you were growing up as a child, for a lot of my clients who count themselves as highly sensitive, their sensitivity is developed almost ahead of their cognitive reasoning and understanding. So during that time period, and I'm not exact, it could be 5, it could be 10, but around that period seems to me that their sensitivity is developed, their emotions have developed, their feelings have developed, but their cognitive understanding of the situation can't get to grips with it. So they're experiencing feelings without understanding where these feelings originate from and what is the methodology of what creates those feelings.
So as children, we experience situations and challenges and unexpected things and things we're not familiar with, and we don't know what to do with those. So that then creates patterns of thought, patterns of emotional reactions based on our thoughts, which have an energy. And so that energy somehow gets blocked within us because of these often traumatic situations when we're children, and that energy then becomes that part of our mind which gets locked down and shut down. Is that what you're saying?
I'll just go through that a little. Yeah. I think you're nearly there.
Okay.
And we're probably going to say the same thing. So a child experiences some form of dysfunctionality. It's not the way that the child thinks, or it should be. It's not right. It's incorrect. Now, the child doesn't know how to deal with that. The child hasn't got the reasoning power as you as an adult has. So the child comes to what I call the vow, what it sees to be the answer in that situation. But remember, it's an answer from an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old. It's not a mature, well thought through answer. It's what the child believes. And what I would say in the majority of my clients, when you do the golden thread process, when you go past the 3 lies, which we'll talk about as in a moment, and go right to the fountainhead, the core, the child will always say, there's something wrong with me. It must be me. Now that might be verbalized in different ways, and it's normally verbalized in the 3 lies. I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, unworthy. But the child has that basic core misunderstanding, that wrong thinking. It can't be my parents, can it? It can't be my teacher. It can't be my brothers, my sisters. It can't be the grown-ups. It must be me. If everybody's telling me I'm in the way, if everybody's telling me that they're not happy with me, the problem must be with me, mustn't it? And that's a childlike understanding. Doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. But the child will believe it's true. And then, as you said, it almost gets locked in. I love what the Chinese say, comes like a kernel, so tight. And then the child then starts to build this protection around it, layers and layers and layers, as the years go by. And that's what we deal with in these videos. And that's why it's good to do a back to basic video. Because these layers can be so confusing. And that's part of the defense. The child creates confusion. So we give up. And that's why it's so difficult to pick your way through. And that's what the golden thread does.
Okay, so something happens to us in childhood, as you say, when we have this misunderstanding, we create these lies about ourselves. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable. This is what has happened to us in childhood. That part of our mind almost like falsely tries to rationalize what's happened by blaming itself. And then it's almost like, as you say, that part of our mind that we call the inner child, it's like grips so tightly onto those lies, that they are the lies that the mind carry into our adulthood.
Yes.
And because they happen to us in childhood, and the resolution that we gave ourselves in childhood was a childlike resolution, that's why it is now that part of our mind, we call it the inner child, because the part of our mind is stuck, therefore, in those childhood years. So whether it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in that kind of zone, that's why that part of our mind that we call the inner child has those childlike qualities, because it's almost like it hasn't emotionally matured and it hasn't emotionally resolved the issues, even though we may be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. The mind, that part of our mind, is it conscious mind or subconscious mind?
Well, that's it. So some people would call that the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be careful. We're back to be mindful of your words. The words are the bricks that build the house you live in. Because most people, when they say subconscious, they then go, well, it's my subconscious mind. I can't do anything about it. It's in my subconscious mind. It's a habit. It's ingrained. They use all those. See, that's another layer, so you don't get down to the core. But your subconscious mind is 92, 94% of your mind. Nearly all of your mind is subconscious. It's still your mind. And this is why this work is so precious and so important and so spiritual, because that part of your mind, the inner child, and here's why the metaphor works. This is how I see it. This is what I see daily, is when you do the golden thread. And for me, it's so powerful, and it's so moving to me when I'm working with my clients. When you go through all the obstacles they're putting your way, and they're mighty obstacles, they can get annoyed with me. They normally get annoyed with me, shout, cry, scream, say it's not working, try and put me off. When I find my way through, you know what I find? I don't find a monster, don't find an evil demon. I find a little 8-year-old stuck. And that little 8-year-old needs someone to put their arm around them and to guide them. What that 8-year-old needs above everything else is emotional education. And this is when the inner child analogy really starts to work. Because if you've got children, physical children of your own, what happens when you try and teach them something? They don't want to hear from you, and it's the same as your inner child. That's why you have to practice, be consistent, learn how to meditate, because you've got to find a way through that pushback, I call it. I'm working with a client, and it's almost like I can actually feel their energy pushing me back, telling me to get away. They don't want to speak to me. And that's the child, get away from me. My own children used to have this, the kids don't do it now, but they used to speak to the hand. It always makes me laugh, because when you get down to the child, that part of your mind, the inner child, it's almost like the child saying that, speak to the hand. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear this. And that's the skill to get around that and to give that child a life lesson that he can begin to mature.
So when we are speaking to the child, as you suggest, we're speaking to a part of our mind which has been formed in childhood and may have been tucked away in our subconscious mind, but yet it can have such a profound and powerful impact on our life.
Totally. Well, I'll give you a great example. You know, what I believe is the core teaching of the Wu Wei wisdom model is you are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. I would tell you that nearly all of my clients, they'll say to me, intellectually, I understand that. Of course, it's true. Emotions don't float around the room and enter my body. I create them. But I would tell you, when we start to do the work, that part of the mind that I'm calling the inner child does not believe that. It believes it comes from outside. It believes it comes externally. It believes that other people created it. It believes that it was given to them, or lots of different beliefs, and this is why the work is so important. And that's why we do these videos, because one video we do might ring a bell with you, and then another video, because everybody has a different interpretation. That's why this back to basic video is worth doing, because it gives you the overall picture. You may use slightly different words and phrases, but look at the bigger picture. Is it that you are matured? You could be successful. I've got clients who are millionaires, highly successful in business, but emotionally, the way they talk to themselves, the way they emotionally self-sabotage themselves, the way they have difficulty in relationships, the way they have difficulty in families, is this emotional. You don't like this term, but I thought this term was quite a good term. There's one of my clients said, it's like a sausage machine. What goes in there goes through this childlike belief system and comes out in a certain way. And that's what it's like. When you get down to the core, this is the filter that everything emotionally goes through. So you don't do this consciously, but it's almost like bang, and it happens.
So the emotions then are really quite important. Our emotions are really quite important as part of this equation of understanding the inner child. Are you saying that it is the inner child that creates our emotions,
Yes.
or are our emotions just a reflection of when something is up with the inner child, almost like a...
Well, both.
Okay.
So that part of your mind is creating the emotions because it doesn't know how to deal with it. That's when people say, oh, you keep saying ignore your emotions. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying interpret your emotions. Your emotions are the number one surface indication that whether you understand something. So emotions are appropriate, natural, normal, absolutely nothing wrong with emotions. But if you're stuck in an emotion, so if you're stuck in the red light, anxiety, depression, panic, fear, whatever you want to call it, scared, if you're stuck in that, then there is a lesson for you to learn. And that's what the golden thread does. Takes you from the high level emotion and it goes, okay, I am now creating a red light. The next question is, why? Why have I chosen to create a red light? I can guarantee you immediately you'll get that part of your mind that we're calling the inner child saying, I'm not creating it. Well, where's it coming from? Well, it's them. It's the way they looked at me. It's what they did to me. They shouldn't do that. That's not right. See, it's all the inner child. So you have to understand and get past that resistance to get down so you can talk to your child, because you've got that part of your mind that's stuck and needs to learn the lesson, whatever the lesson is for you. That's why it's called a life lesson, something you have to learn. Then if you do not learn it, it goes on the carousel and it comes back round. Might be different people, might be different times, but the same lesson. How many times, be honest, to yourself as you're listening to this, how many times have you said, why does that always keep happening to me? What's going on here? I say it like sometimes, what have I got to learn here? There's a lesson here to be learned. They're not easy to learn. That's why you've got to sit in the meditation. The Taoists call it sit in it, sit with it, sit quiet, and just do the golden thread yourself. So why did I create that? What was the thinking? What's the belief? And you can do it now as with me. If you're suffering from a red light feeling, whatever you want to call it, anxiety, depression, scared, frightened, abandonment, whatever, panic, jealousy, whatever word you want to call it, that's why I would stop calling it those words, because they get confused. Call it a red light. Just sit quietly, take a breath and just drop your shoulders and settle in. If you join us on a Sunday night, I'll show you how to do this every Sunday. And just take a breath and just say, now, why did I choose to create that red light? Then you'll see your mind, it'll be, well, it's what they did. It's them. No. I know they did something. Why did I choose to create a red light? Whoa, and then you'll get the resistance. Then you'll get that actual feeling of what I call chi energy, not flowing as it should. And this is what this symbol means. The yin and the yang. The center line is the chi flowing wu wei in balance, in harmony, in flow. So when you get that resistance, and when I'm working with a client, I can feel it. Even on video, you can see their body changes and their face changes and their voice changes. And they basically said, don't step any farther. And you have to find a way through that. So when you create a red light, don't blame other people. They may have created the stimuli and the event. That's fine. Why did you create the red light? And try and go past and do a couple of whys. Why? So why did I do that? Well, it's not fair. So why do you think it's not fair? Well, I shouldn't do that. Why shouldn't I do that? Well, it's not the way I want it. You see, and you just keep on doing that little basic thing until you get down to the core. And that's where you've got to learn the life lesson. And that's what this back to basic video is trying to show you. Don't overcomplicate it. That's why I like the word inner child. It's a simple word. You know, what we try and do in Wu Wei Wisdom is to make these teachings as simple, straightforward as we can, because we want you to do it. The best comment that I get on the videos, and somebody says, I tried it, David, it worked. It really is good. I'm going to keep on doing it, because you've got to keep doing it and get the consistency, because you can do this. You can find this way. You have everything that you need, because when you get down to there, that child, as I've said earlier, is not an evil. It's a good child. You're a good person. You're a spiritual person. You are awesome. That child is awesome. And you just need some help and guidance. Yes, it will push you back. It will be a bit awkward. Will be a bit stroppy. We'll have a couple of temper tantrums, but you got to keep calm. And that's when you're in your Shen, when you're centered, when you're focused, when you're in control.
Great, David. And I like the idea of using the emotions, the top level emotions, as a guide for when that we may need to sit quietly, reflect, and connect back to that part of our mind we're calling the inner child, to see whether there is something going on with the inner child that needs to be worked on. So
it sounds easy, Alex.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle, when the child is kicked off, and they kick off so quickly, and then you're in the middle of the emotion, it's one of the hardest things to do, just to center yourself and say, no, we're not going any further until we calm.
But that's also why I was going to say, for a lot of people who are not used to doing this kind of inner child communication, inner child reparenting work, and we're going to talk about that more in terms of ways you can communicate with your inner child on a daily basis in next week's video. But if we don't respect and appreciate the importance and the impact that this part of our mind, the inner child, is having on our lives, if we just decide to kind of run with the emotions and let the inner child keep creating the red light, uncomfortable, painful, challenging emotions, because it is gripping onto beliefs and thoughts which are not authentic, then that's why what is essentially a small part of our mind formed in childhood, which is also just a small part of who we are, the greater who we are, as you described earlier. That's why that small but significant part of our mind can completely overtake our life. Because if we choose to ignore the real purpose of the emotions, and if we choose to ignore the inner child's, in essence, cries for help, cries for emotional education, those emotions will get louder and louder and louder. And then all we spend our time doing is trying to avoid the emotions, mask the emotions, fight the emotions, when actually the real issue to be dealt with, the real life lesson to be learned, the real value in the whole process is touching base with the inner child, touching base with that part of our mind, looking deeper and trying to find out what is going on with our thoughts and our beliefs.
Okay, so two things there. So when I offer this to my clients, they'll say things like, I'm not going there. Why? Well, it's a dark place. I don't want to go there. I don't know what to do it. And that's why we do these videos, to show you how to do it. And another part of the analogy, the interesting thing about the inner child, and I use this analogy, it's like a physical child. if a physical child came up to you, your child, and they're about 8, and they said, Mommy, Daddy, can I have a chocolate biscuit? And you go, yes, of course you can. So you give them a chocolate biscuit, and they go, can I have another one? Okay, you've been a good boy. Here's 2. And then they eat 2, and they say, well, can I have another one? Now what do? You say, no, 2 is enough. And then the child kicks off, throws a temper tantrum, has a squealing piglet. Now, if you say, oh, here's a packet, just eat the packet then. Just shut up, I can't stand it, just have the packet. You give in to the child eats the packet, and he's sick all over your kitchen floor. Who does the child blame? You. And that's exactly why the analogy and the metaphor of the inner child works. Because, as Alex says, the inner child wants to be in control, wants to know, wants to tell you what to do, thinks it knows better. It's a bit cocky. It's like you put an 8-year-old in the wheel of your car, driving your car. You're in the back seat. He and she's driving away. But when they have an accident, who gets the blame? You do. And this is all because you are refusing, in our language, to take self-responsibility, to be able to stand up to the child. Now, my clients will say, oh, you don't know what it's like, David. It's like a living nightmare. And I absolutely agree with you. It would be like saying to that child, you can't have any more chocolate biscuits. You've had 2. That's enough for today. And the child throws a big tantrum. You've got to have the mindset to be in your Shen, to keep calm, to keep centered, to see it for what it is. It's a child trying to wrestle authority away from you. And they can't do that, because then you can't give your life to that person, to that small child.
David, can you pass me the Tao sign? I want to kind of really apply this to the Yin Yang concept. So you've said if this is our human energy, so our body, our skin, our bone, our cells, and also our mind, which includes the inner child. And this is our Shen, our spiritual nature.
Our essence. The true of who we are, that I believe.
Yeah. And so the Wu Wei, the middle line, the balance is the balance, the flow, the harmony between the two. And if, as you say, when we keep giving the inner child, when we don't listen and reason and try to emotionally educate the inner child, when we give into it, when we keep feeding it the biscuits for a quiet life, what happens is that energy of our mind, which is a discrete part of our mind, it's separate from our physicality. So in some respects, it's quite, it's just one small part of us. But when we keep feeding it, when we don't emotionally educate it, this human side of us gets bigger and bigger and bigger and dominates.
It goes out of balance.
It dominates the Shen.
So it goes out of balance.
Yeah.
And then that creates the red lights. That's what the red lights are. Okay. It's telling you you're out of balance.
Okay, I get it, yeah.
So
they're an indicator, the surface level indicator that the energy, our human energy, including the energy of our mind and the inner child, has gone out of balance with the Shen. Because the Wu Wei balance, when we're living in flow, when we're living in harmony, when we're being true to our authentic selves, that's when the mind and the Shen, including the inner child, are working in a harmonious cooperation and balance in that flow.
So on this symbol, sometimes the Shen is stronger. So I would say that's in times of meditation, times of stillness, times of quietness. There's times when the Yang should be a bit stronger. That's perhaps at work or, in normal day-to-day driving the car. You don't want to be driving the car in a deep meditation. And so this line isn't straight. This line is moving all the time. Yeah. Go back to my analogy of the chocolate biscuits. When the child is sick and ill and looks up to you with a green face and says, that's your fault, to be honest, he's right. She's right. It's your fault. You gave in to the child. And you know better. The child just wants chocolate biscuits. It doesn't see, as Alex said, the big picture. All it sees is a packet of chocolate biscuits that it wants. Doesn't know why it wants them. It just wants it because they taste nice. Doesn't think, well, how about my body and how about this being sick? So when the child looks back at you with a green face and says, it's your fault, actually, he's right. It is your fault because you would put, in our language, put the parenting technique in.
And also, it kind of reflects the fact, like, just like a child is very self-consumed. The child is not interested in the wholeness of us. The child is not interested in trying to achieve flow or balance. The child just wants what it wants, when it wants, and it wants you to deal with the problem and sort it out. So it's not experiencing these awful red light emotions.
Absolutely.
And so we need to, as part of the reparenting process, step back. Don't just follow the inner child without question, because then that tips it more and more and more and more out of balance. We need to step back and reconnect to the wholeness of who we are. And in these situations, most importantly, that means connecting to our yin nature, our Shen. So the inner child is the yang, the Shen is the yin. And so in order to restore the balance, to bring things back into the harmonious flow and balance, we need to reconnect to the Shen.
Yeah, another way you could think about it is like a set of scales, and you're trying to bring the scales back into balance. And that is really as what you're trying to do. And that's why when you avoid your emotions, as Alex says, because what is that child doing when it wants more chocolate biscuits and it starts screaming and shouting and having temper tantrums? Actually, fasten down now, you're not going to like this word, but it's actually emotional blackmail. That's what it's doing. It's emotionally trying to manipulate you. It's saying, I'm going to cause you so much emotional discomfort that you will give in to me and I'll get my own way. And that's why I like the analogy of the inner child. That's what that part of your mind is doing. It's like emotional blackmail. If I kick up enough fuss, if I create enough turmoil, you'll give in to me. You'll go and have another drink, or you'll go and have another chocolate biscuit, or you'll eat more, or you'll do something. Then I'll get my own way. And when you hear that inner voice saying, it's not fair, it's not fair, remember what the inner child is saying, what all children are saying. Again, here's the metaphor working perfectly. When you hear a physical child saying it's not fair, what they're saying is, it's not the way I want it to be. When you hear yourself saying, it's not fair, same thing. That's what your inner child is saying. This is not the way I think it should be. But that's not connecting to the reality of the situation. Going back to this, that's not connecting to the wholeness, the oneness. Sometimes in life, things don't happen the way we want it. That's reality. We have to find, back to my stream now, we have to find the wu way around. We have to find that flow. We have to be, the number one thing for us as Taoists, for you, is to flourish, is to be the best that you can be, is to be able to, I can't promise you that if you follow our teachings, your life's going to be wonderful. Roses are going to grow around the door. Bunny rabbits are going to jump in the field every time you walk out. That's not reality. But I will promise you that when things come your way, you can maneuver it around because you've got the wider vision and looking at it through an 8-year-old lens and putting you through that sausage machine.
And you are back in balance.
You're back in balance.
You're back in balance. So when we do this work, when we do the reparenting work that we talk about on so many of our videos, what we're doing is when the reparenting is done, I think we've done a video, is the reparenting work ever done? And we've said, no, it's an ongoing thing, because the inner child is an integral part of your human energy, your mind. So when the inner child is in balance, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't, it emotionally matures in some respects, but it's always there as part of who you are.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always there. And then what you're doing through life is trying to keep in that balance. You're kind of walking a tightrope. What was that film, A Man on the Edge, where he's walking the man on a wire? That's right. And you'll walk. This is what you're doing.
And that's you're walking the wu-wei tightrope.
The more you do it, the better you get at it. Now, Is the wire going to move? Yes, it's going to move. The wire's not going to be static. And then you say, well, I want the wire to be still. But that's not reality. You've got to be able to walk that wire. And you're absolutely awesome to walk the wire. And so build up your skills. And this is what we've talked about today. And going back to, if you like these going back to basic videos, just let us know and we'll do a few more, because I think taking it all down and going right back to the core, the root of the problem, and then we can answer your questions. If you're in our Facebook community, write it in saying, didn't quite understand that, or what do you mean by that? Because it allows us to then explain and to develop, and then we get feedback, and then we can do more videos on just specific items that you're missing. Because if you miss one step, then it throws it out, and the inner child's in control then, you see, and then you've got to be in control and balanced.
And one final thing, David, I want to say, when we bring our inner child, that energy of our mind, back into a balance and a harmony with our Shen energy, our authentic self. Well, this is the authentic self. The Shen, our true spiritual nature, our higher self, our essence, working in harmony and balance with our human energy.
Absolutely.
When we bring our human energy and the inner child back into the balance, when we emotionally educate it, when we communicate with it effectively, that inner child has beautiful, positive qualities. Fantastic. It's creative, it's joyful, it's inquisitive.
It's determined.
It's all those qualities
wonderful.
That we had as a child, that all children have. So again, it's a fundamental misunderstanding to think that the inner child is all bad. It just creates problems. It's something to be, a force to be reckoned with and controlled and pinned down. No, the inner child is just a part of our mind that can go very much out of balance energetically because of lies we tell ourselves, lies we grip hold of in our beliefs, which we carry with us into adulthood. But if we can educate the child, if we can work with the child, if we can establish that beautiful relationship between the adult us and that young part of our mind, then the inner child is a magnificent part of us.
I'm just smiling because when we have this when I have this conversation with a client, the client will go, "Oh God, this is going to be really hard. Oh, I haven't got the time." And I keep saying, "But you've got the time to be out of balance. Yeah. You've got the time to worry. How much time do you spend a day worrying, fretting, getting worked up, allowing your emotions, avoiding them, and all the stuff we talk about? How much of your time?" It'd be interesting, to do a kind of a pie chart and just mark off how much time. And you haven't got time to do this work. And then all that time that you waste, because all of that is wasted, now will be going for you to flourish. And this is what the Taoist teaching is, for you to flourish, for you to be the best that you can be. You are awesome. Be the best that you can be. And that's why these teachings are so basically important. Right 101 stuff. Get this right, and then the others. It's like that domino. Get the first domino right, and then all the other dominoes will follow. And you've got to get this thinking straight. So please, if there's something we've said today that you still go, I don't get this, write it down. Join our Facebook community and write, I didn't get what Alex says. I didn't get it right. And then we can answer the questions, and our mediators, the girls, can jump in and just give you a guide. And then once that domino drops, wow, it just goes wham straight through your life, and you put a different grinder in the sausage machine.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Well, I hope that has answered the question, is the inner child real? Why is it important? How come it's so powerful? And how does it fit into the wholeness of who we are? Like David says, if you have any comments or questions, please do share them below. If this video has helped you and you think it will help someone else, please do share it with them. Next week, we're going to be sharing some practical inner child exercises that you can try for yourself. So do tune in for that. If you want to work one-to-one with David on anything we've talked about today, David works by video call with clients all over the world on inner child issues, and he'd love to work with you too. So I'll put more information about David's sessions below for you. And finally, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. We produce new videos every week, and when you subscribe, click the bell notifications button, and that means you'll get a little email notification every time we publish a new video. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.